Today I'm testing the A44H studio monitors from Adam Audio. Now I'm very familiar with the upright MTM mid-tweeter mid format that works very well for several reasons we'll discuss in this video. But the question is the horizontal format a gimmick, or does it genuinely serve a useful purpose that can benefit our mixing and music production? Let's find out. Hi, I'm Thorne, a mixing and mastering engineer in London. The Adam A44Hs are part of Adam's A-series studio monitors, which replace the AX series. Also available are the single woofer A4V for vertical, the larger A7V, the double woofer three-way A77H, and the three-way A8H models. The A44Hs retail at just under £1,000 or $1,600 a pair, so they're neither in the budget-friendly range of the T-series nor in the expensive high-end range of the S-series, but they sit very nicely in the middle whilst delivering a very good value to performance ratio. The A44Hs are a front-ported speaker featuring two 4-inch multi-layer mineral fibre cones and a 1-inch XR tweeter. XR stands for Extended Accelerated Ribbon Technology. This is Adam's modernised version of the AMT tweeter, featuring a folded diaphragm that increases the acoustically effective surface area of the diaphragm by 2.5 times, resulting in wider dispersion. The tweeter housing waveguide delivers dispersion of 120 degrees horizontally and 70 degrees vertically. More on this later because there's an issue to consider here. The frequency response at plus or minus 3 decibels is 49 Hz to 41 kHz. Now the fact that these 4-inch woofers can go down to 49 Hz is quite impressive. The MTM design splits the low frequency workload between the two woofers, which helps keep distortion to a minimum and also facilitates more headroom than would otherwise be available with a single woofer speaker. The crossover is at 2.4 kHz with no measurable or audible changes in performance at this frequency. The speakers have a maximum SPL of 103 decibels, which isn't massive, but I would argue that puts them in the small room near field category. Now personally I suggest mixing between 80 and 85 decibels, so these have more than enough headroom for room correction and plenty of additional volume. More on room correction shortly because these speakers have a really cool feature. The backplate features the following options: cuts and boosts at the following frequencies, bass low shelf at 80 Hz, desk reflection filters at 200 Hz, a presence bell at 2.5 kHz, and a treble shelf at 7 kHz, and plus or minus 12 dB level trim. We also have the balanced XLR and unbalanced RCA inputs. Now you need to select which one you're using this button. Personally, I'd rather that it automatically detected which input was being used. I think that would be quite useful, but very minor detail. And there are two voicing options: Pure, which is a fully flat frequency response, and UNR. Now this voicing is apparently typical of the AX series, where the bass and treble are boosted, and there's a slight dip in the 2 to 5 kHz region. Adam states that the UNR setting is useful for listening pleasure and is not recommended for critical listening where accuracy is the highest priority, and I would totally agree. Personally, I preferred these in the pure setting, where it's just the natural speaker's frequency response without any trickery or changing of the frequency response. Just seemed more natural to me. But that's probably because I'm used to listening to calibrated speakers for mixing. Now all the backplate settings are accessible and can be remotely controlled from the A-Control software via Ethernet cable. And this is where you can find the cool feature. The A-Control software is where you can load your Sound ID room correction profiles onto the speakers to utilize their onboard DSP processing to correct the speakers to the room. Now, if you don't know, quickly, Sound ID is the speaker calibration and room correction software from Sonarworks that listens to how your speakers perform in the room and then changes the frequency response and the phase coherence so that they sound as good as they can in your room. A free 60-day trial of Sound ID is included with every A-series speaker upon registration on Adam's website. To find out more about Sound ID, click this link in the description below, where there is also a link to a video comparing Sound ID with Arc Studio and Trinnov. So storing the correction profile on the speaker's eye off your desktop is a really useful feature to permanently avoid having to use the system-wide application, which can be buggy and a bit annoying, or your DAW plugin where you might forget to turn it off when you're printing a mix. I think all speakers that utilize DSP should adopt this system, whether it be for Sound ID or Arc. I think it's a useful feature. To upload a calibration profile to your speakers, simply select the Load Sound ID preset option in the menu found in the top left corner of the A Control application. The latency introduced by the DSP, including when utilizing a Sound ID profile, is a mere 1.7 milliseconds, which is inaudible, making this system great for recording and producing, doing things in real time, and performing accurate EQ sweeps. What we're looking at here are the distortion readings for the A44H speakers, measured using a measurement microphone from Sound ID, and this is Room EQ Wizard on screen now. What we're looking at is the brown line, which is our fundamental levels of distortion up the frequency spectrum. But what we need to pay attention to is the second and third order harmonic lines, which are our red and orange lines here. Now, if these are measuring below 50, that's acceptable. This is decibels on this left axis here. And if below 40 is very good and below 30 is exceptional, but that's very difficult to achieve given how complicated speaker design is, and it's always a trade-off with distortion versus design somewhere. So generally this is pretty good. What I'm going to look at next is the harmonic content once the speakers have been calibrated. Now, I calibrated with Trinnov, and this is the reading. Immediately you'll notice there are two areas where there are additional harmonics at 590 Hertz. Now, this is exactly where I have two dips in the frequency response, where modal issues in the room are causing cancellation, and Trinnov is effectively trying to load the speakers with additional amplitude at those frequencies to smoothen it out, and particularly in the low end, that is inducing additional harmonic content. At 90 Hertz, we are getting about 10 decibels more harmonic content, but that's not the end of the world. I've seen other speakers which measure a lot worse with Trinnov trying to tackle the same null. So without Trinnov, this is a pretty good reading overall. Harmonic rich low end sounds good. It sounds thick, it sounds deep, it sounds warm. We like the sound of it, but it's not ideal for mixing or production because it's kind of fake low end. What we want for low end, which will help us get really good mix translation, is clean low end with as low a distortion as possible. So without Trinnov, these speakers are reading well. With Trinnov, this is not too bad. It's below 50 decibels, which I think is acceptable. I can hear it a little bit in the speakers, but I don't think it's going to compromise my mixes too much at all. The horizontal MTM format helps soften the sharpness often associated with ribbon tweeters into a very musical and non-fatiguing sound. There's something about the cones either side of the tweeter that does this. The speakers are very well balanced in terms of frequency delivery, but also in terms of how forward or backwards sound should be. For example, there's a snare drum in Tina Turner's Simply the Best, and that is my benchmark for testing whether a speaker or a headphone is placing the snare too forward or back in the mix. These speakers sit just right, and this means I can trust that they will translate accurately. The phantom center is very solid, and the stereo imaging is very wide. There's a lovely top-end detail with these ribbon tweeters which resolves transients thoroughly, creating a good sense of depth. And for example, in Boz Scaggs's Thanks to You, there is a beautiful long reverb on the rim click, and the length and sustain of this is something I listen out for when reviewing speakers. I have a benchmark for how long and toppy and expansive this should be, set by the PSI A23s that excel at this, and the Adams recreate this length very well, and in fact better than most speakers I've heard. Now, many years ago when I started my YouTube channel back in 2020, I used to have the original A7 monitors in my old bedroom studio, and I always found them too bright and the low end sounded like plastic. I ultimately sold them in favour of my Neumann KH120s for a while, The A44Hs don't have these characteristics. They are a welcome improvement of these issues, whilst also having much more life and microdynamic control than the KH120s, which I famously didn't get on with. In theory, because the XR tweeter and the waveguide disperse so widely and create such a wide stereo image, you would think the listening area would be wide too. However, this isn't quite the case, and this is not just about room frequency issues, as we'll discuss. The horizontal MTM format overrides this dispersion, creating a beaming effect, which results in a focused and narrow listening position from side to side. The horizontal ISO bar here depicts a very narrow dispersion in the mid-range, and this is audible as you move off axis from the speaker beam. The vertical dispersion is very wide, so when you move up and down from the listening position, the sound remains cohesive. Now, this is the opposite effect of the vertical MTM speakers, and as we generally remain seated when working, you could argue that the vertical format is the right way around and the horizontal format is the wrong way around. However, there is a potential benefit. In theory, this should result in less activation of wall-to-wall, side wall-to-wall modal issues and resonances, just like the vertical MTM format helps mitigate floor-to-ceiling modal issues and incidentally desk reflections. Now, I found these speakers to be less audibly influenced by the room acoustics than most other speakers I've tried in here. As you can see, I'm still putting the studio together. And of course, these speakers can be set up horizontally, but I tested this and I felt the speaker worked best in their intended horizontal orientation. If you're working in a narrow room, these speakers will be a good choice for this reason. However, if you're working in a room with a low ceiling, the vertical MTM speakers may be a better choice. However, I don't think Adam do one of those. Oops. Now, it's easier to treat the sidewalls as well than the ceiling, so I think most people are going to find the vertical MTMs more beneficial. Let me know what you think in the comments. So for under £1,000, these are very good speakers. Now, I will inevitably get trolled in the comments for saying that, because unfortunately that's the sad nature of YouTube now. If you say positive things about a product, you're deemed a marketing sellout. But I don't review products that I don't like or I don't think are useful, so this is my genuine and professional opinion. These are one of the least room acoustic influenced speakers I've tried, as I said, and I can highly recommend them for small studios and home studios where physical limitations can often compound room acoustic problems. It is worth considering that these speakers deliver a very focused and, narrow listening area moving from side to side, but the advantage is improved room interaction compared to other speakers. Whether the trade-off is worth it is your call. Let me know in the comments. Overall though, I very much enjoyed working on these speakers and achieved good, consistent mix translation when corrected with Trinnov. I would love to try these with a pair of subwoofers. I have these rolled off at 50 Hz at the moment to avoid the harmonic issues in the low end as discussed in my last video, but I'd really like to try these with subs, so let me know if you'd like to see that video in the comments. On that horizontal bombshell, I've been Ed Thorne. Check out this playlist in the description below for more speaker reviews. It's been emotional. Thanks for watching.